Hi, I'm Arthur, and this is part 5 in a 20-part series I am doing covering fan-favorite successor chapters in order of the legions. Do you need to have seen the other parts to understand this one? No, but it would make me happy. I have been on the record saying that identifying successors of the White Scars to cover in this series in all of its successive, seasons is difficult to say the least, but it is possible. I've been asked on livestream a few times what is my biggest achievement in regards to this channel, and I look back pretty fondly on my Marauders video with a degree of happiness, but I think that's mostly because I found a way to spread a single paragraph of lore over a 10-minute video, which is kinda neat. It even is stated in universe that the successor chapters of the Adeptus Astartes are like less than 10% made up of successors of the White Scars. Does that mean they are not cool? No. It means that you can kind of fiddle around a bit, and I'm gonna run dry on them bastards quickly if I keep doing these series over and over again, but I do want to cover everything at some point. And I do have a few ideas after that where to go, but that's besides the point. I have been invested in a few topics as of late, just doing my own deep dive research, and one that caught my attention was the Badab War, and I've been looking into it and drawing comparisons and whatnot. And a lot of people really like the Badab War as it's this weird section of Imperial history where there was a point to be made that both sides of the conflict could be considered the guy that was in the right, depending on how far you get into the conflict. But towards the end, it kind of becomes pretty clear who is the bad guy here. The Maelstrom Warders are a group of individuals who are kind of weird and are central to this conflict. And I just spoke about someone who was a part of it, and I don't think they were a part of the Badab War, though I'd have to double check. But the Maelstrom Warders themselves were the ones that made up the majority of the forces of the Astral Claw's goons during the Badab War. The Charnel Guard was the one I'm referring to. That's a small faction of Blood Angel's successors, and I think that it's very interesting that they were a part of two major lore events, which is the War of the False Primarch as well as the Badab War. But one of the other chapters that they were fighting alongside with has kind of caught my attention, and they're the reason why I decided to choose them in the making of this video. Now, if you know your Badab War lore, you know exactly who I'm talking about. So, to break it down, who are the chapters of the Maelstrom Warders? There was the Astral Claws, which were the group leading the charge, the ones with Huron Luft, now Huron Blackheart, as their chapter master. There were the Lamenters, God rest their tired souls, the Charnel Guard, like I mentioned already, and then you have the individuals I'm talking about today, which is the Mantis Warriors. I do think it's funny that the second founding chapter I covered for the White Scars were the Marauders, and they are actually listed as having a successor chapter of their own, which I don't know how that works, as it's not really discussed that often. I know that the general consensus is that most chapters send in a gene seed tithe so that if ever the Mechanicus needs to make a new chapter to govern a new task, they just make a new one. But I don't know what it means when the successors are successors of a specific chapter rather than the main legion. It's kind of interesting, but I digress. So, the Mantis Warriors are a successor of the Marauders chapter, and they are part of the gene lineage of the White Scars, so you can kind of trace it back. With that preamble out of the way, who exactly are the Mantis Warriors and why are they so damn cool? It's because they are basically just the Raptors, but 20 to 25% less rational, which I think is dope as all hell. So, for a quick understanding, they were a very reclusive chapter and kept to themselves for the most part, which meant they were often never really messed with in any way that mattered, right? So, when they were forced into the Maelstrom Warders by the High Lords of Terra, they did find things go a little bit smoother, with a hand from other chapters that would actually work with them with very little degrees of them trying to govern everything the Mantis Warriors were doing. It was good until it wasn't, that whole Badab War thing, definitely, yeah. So, because of their reclusive tendencies, they actually started to form this kind of ideal way of living, where in order to preserve their limited supplies, they would actually pick up guerrilla tactics as their main fighting style. Like the Raptors, in order to fight and succeed succeed as they needed to in their design section, which I believe is the Endymion cluster. I'm going to skip the Badab War, but for context, the Marine in this image that isn't Tyberos is a Mantis warrior, so I get it. It's kinda, yeah, they got their ass handed to them on a silver platter and ended up worse for wears, but comically enough, they were actually given a way out. They did plea that they didn't know that Huron, the chapter master of the Astral Claws, had fallen to chaos, and because of that, the Inquisition proclaimed them free from taint after some investigations, of course, and as recompense for their efforts against the Imperium, they were supposed to go on a penance crusade, meaning no new recruitment of neophytes for 100 years, and all their lands, planets, fortresses, and so on were to be sold off to the Firehawks and the other chapters that were engaging in the war against the forces of the Astral Claws. Like, even their main recruitment planet was raided by the Carcharodons to get more numbers for the Carcharodons' own chapter. Where does that leave us on their journey? I know I'm skipping a bit, but now that we have the context of their existence, let's discuss the specifics of the chapter and why I think they deserve more interest. So for one, they are the indomitable human spirit made manifest, as even though they got absolutely fuck-slammed by the Badab War and its repercussions, I find that they refuse to give up and just keep doing their job to the best of their ability. Another good example of this is even when the Torchbearer fleets came in, which were the ships carrying the Grey Shield Primaris reinforcements to supply to dying chapters, even though at this point in the timeline they were considered redeemed and pardoned, they were never actually given Primaris reinforcements. They were seen as too untrustworthy by the Custodes and the individuals who were riding atop those fleets. So they were only given the technology to make Primaris, but not the Primaris themselves, so they were still a very understrength chapter. Which, to further my point, did they get upset at? Only a little bit, but after some exemplary actions and deciding to teach further guerrilla tactics to the next generation, they managed to create Primaris Marines and have been steadily recruiting new individuals. So as I said, they were eventually released from the Penance Crusade and now are slowly regaining numbers using the new Primaris tech, using whatever they can scrape and scrounge in order to survive. It's like the opposite of the Marines Malevolent in some cases, where people don't supply the Marines Malevolent, like the Mechanicus, the Imperium as a whole, because they are a hated chapter that does incredibly bad things. The Mantis Warriors are not supplied because they are a hated chapter that does really good things for the Imperium, but they don't complain about it like the Marines Malevolent. People just don't trust them, which I think is very interesting, because if I wasn't trusted to the degree that they were, I would probably become full-on renegade and start raiding other Space Marines like the Marines Malevolent, but instead they just stoically defy the odds and keep going even though they're in a bit of a shit situation. Due to them having ludicrously reduced numbers, they do tend to have a bit of a superior stock in terms of traditional Space Marines, as because of them having such limited gear and them having limited options for, tactical response, they have to become the best of the best when it comes to what they do, and gee golly gosh, they are. So on to some more interesting facts about them. There are two special ranks in the Mantis Warriors, as they are actually really Codex compliant in comparison to the rest of the White Scar's successors, but they do have little caveats here and there. These ranks, I should note, are badass as hell. The first one is the super elite specialists that are branded with a bunch of snake tattoos. These individuals are named the Praying Mantidae, because I guess calling it the fucking Praying Mantises would be a bit too simple, now wouldn't you agree? These individuals specialize in hunting down the remaining members of the Astral Claws that tricked them into working for Huron Blackheart. These are some of the most badass Marines you could have, receiving more training than most Space Marines would in their entire lifetime in a short period of time. The other individuals that have reached a different rank that is outside of the normal structure of the Codex Astartes is individuals who survived the Badab campaign and ended up defecting to help against the Tyrant of Badab. These are specialists who still harbor a deep-seated hatred for the betrayal and the deception of Huron, but don't go out of their way to hunt them like the Praying Mantidae do, and these individuals don a completely different armor color, specializing in sort of camouflage, I guess you could say, and these are called the Tranquility Snipers. warriors. These are some of the best snipers in the entirety of the Imperium and have very much been used effectively in the current guerrilla tactics way of surviving the Mantis Warriors does. They are a chapter that, in terms of their own belief, wish to be left alone. They are not against camaraderie, but they believe that their autonomy and ability to act on their own is one of their biggest strengths. It's listed in several codex entries and Imperial Armory books that they have a bunch of custom kill markers, battle honors, and each reward a brother receives in terms of service is unique to him and him alone, as well as the deed that he committed, as it's a part of chapter tradition to maintain a sense of individuality all the way down to the Marine end of things. They try to remain aloof, not so much uncaring, but have a balanced set of humors, as losing your cool can cost you your life when you have so little support. They often get caught in horrendous situations, but it always ends with them regrouping, figuring shit out, and then just locking in. These guys are awesome. They are everything I want in the Raptors, with a little bit more flair from them. I like the Mantis Warriors, and I hope they get the reinforcements they deserve for themselves in time for another novel, a story, or, something else like that, because I think they are a very fun chapter, as there is a lot of interesting stories to be told with this kind of lineage and this kind of story build up to it. But that is just how I feel about them, and I think that they are a chapter that does fit the moniker and the title of this video as a chapter that is really, really cool, but no one talks about them. So what do you all think about the Mantis Warriors? Do you think they're cool? Not cool? And do you think they're a little too hidden, or maybe you think that they're just a hidden gem and deserve to be in the place that they're at? Let me know in the comments, as well as like and subscribe, as it helps the channel immensely. Special thanks to my channel members for supporting me, and if you want to support me as well as gain access to additional and early content, then become a channel member today. Thanks again for watching, and before I go, I forgot to mention they have an extensive history with the Death Watch, or at least they had one before they were like less than 100 Marines.